Well, welcome everybody. It's food for thought for seniors here at WMB Church. We're so glad that you're joining us for this special event. As our guest, we have with us Jeff Wilmer. I'll introduce a little bit more about him in a few moments' time. But right now, I'd like to introduce those that are with us here on the screen before you. We have Adam Knowles, site pastor at our Kitchener site. We got Sherry Schultz. She's on the leadership team for the seniors ministry at WMB Church, both sites. Deborah Riley, also on the team, and Christine Simpson, who is also on the team. Also, Mike Burgess is our pastor for young adults. We're glad to have him together with us. Mike has worked together in the homeless community and people who find themselves on the street for one reason or another for a good number of years. And he has an incredibly passionate heart for those who are less fortunate. And so I've asked him to start us off this morning with just sharing a devotional with us and sharing some of his insights as to when he reads scripture, how does what he's experienced with Oasis and other ministries, how does that sort of translate into what Jesus was talking about? It's up to you, Mike, and when you're done, just open us up with prayer as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you guys for having me today. When I think about seniors ministry and today's topic, we're going to talk about being a good neighbor, loving your neighbor. And I think about some of you who've been in KW your whole lives and just the progression of neighborhoods and how the expressway changes your neighborhoods, how there at one point would have been stop signs at a certain section of town, and now it's street lights and progressed different neighborhoods, and there's more diversity in some, and all that to say is that neighbors change, neighborhoods change, but how we're called to love them stays the same. And so today we're going to dig into Luke 10 verses 25 to 37, and you're probably super familiar with it. It's the story of it's often titled as the Good Samaritan. Personally, I don't get why it's titled the Good Samaritan. It's talking about a Samaritan that loves properly. We know that God is the only person who's good, but Bibles put titles in things for some reason. So we're going to dig into Luke 10. And really the overall theme is that I want to impress on your heart is to be understanding that God's calling us and to be a good neighbor and to be aware of the people around us. So let me read, and then I'm going to be sharing it from a point of a caretaker. And maybe this is a different way of seeing it, but I hope you learned something from it. So, and behold, a lawyer or a person of the law that understood the law stood up to put him to test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you shall live." But he desired to justify himself. So he said to Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by the other side of the road. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and he saw him. He had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to the inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." And so we just have to read the story to get the theme. Like, it's one of those simple stories. This is why it's shared over and over again in church. There's not much I can cover that's different. But being a caretaker for downtown people for so long and reading this, I feel like it's given me a different lens on things. So I'll just share a couple thoughts on that. And so the first off, we have to recognize just in the point of caretaker. I'm going to skip over all the Samaritan stuff that yes, the Jews hated Samaritans. Yes, this road was dangerous, and yes, this person traveling down it probably made a foolish decision traveling alone versus being with people. I'm just going to skip over that and go straight to the caretaking part. So first, you have to see that there's a person in need. And I think this is something we often overlook in our day-to-day journey, that God has people around us that are in need. They might not be half dead. I almost think it's easier if they'd be half dead, because for our society, that would just be getting them to the hospital. And that'd be a whole lot easier than if they were spiritually dead or just hurting or hopeless. And so first, we have to see the person. And I think the Spirit gives us opportunity to do that if we allow him to do so. And then he had compassion on him. And this journey of generosity started happening, where he went to him and he bandaged and soothed him with wine. And I think so often this is what we're used to, especially as Anabaptists. We're used to this soothing people. We love caring for people with hospitality. We love doing the soothing part of the ministry. We're quite good at that. But then here comes the personal sacrifice to the generosity piece, where he puts on his own donkey. So now he has to walk by foot, and his donkey's carrying this person. So there's already a sacrifice of journeying with him. He brings him to an inn. And so I don't know if that's a change of direction, if he had to go back to the inn where he was coming from, the town he was coming from, or if he had to go forward. But either way, you can tell through the scripture that there was a sacrifice, because he stayed overnight with him, meaning that his intentions would have been thrown off. And so he pays out of his own pocket. So there's even more extra generosity there. And 2 denarii is about 2 or 3 weeks worth of pay for someone in the inn. And so some of the conclusions I've come to in realizing and caring for people is that God wants us to have a generous heart. There's lots of arguments and discussions about, should I give a homeless person money? Should I buy him a meal? And so I think the simple answer I've been able to give is that in different seasons, I've had different responses. And so I'll probably have a different response in a couple of years, but my main response has been act generously. And that's your response. What they do with the money, what they do with the meal is their response, right? And so God actually has enough generosity to pour out. Believe it or not, he can pour out and we can abuse that generosity. Crazy thought that we actually abuse God's generosity. But we still have to go that way. And so as a caretaker, we pour out generosity, but then we journey with the person. And so with homeless people, this is where it gets challenging. It gets really challenging because it takes time out of your day to stop and talk to that person. Maybe it takes several conversations with that person. This is where the conversation of neighborhoods, to me, it seems it would be almost more simple back when KW was smaller, because you'd see people every day that are in your path. But I think it's still like that. I believe that if you see someone twice in KW, it's a good sign that you're supposed to care for them, because we're big enough now that when I see someone twice, and I actually register that, because I'm so focused on my day that it kind of stops me in my track and say, okay, I should probably pay attention. I just saw this person twice. Maybe I can ask them how their day is going. And so likewise with homeless people, we got to build that conversation up and that dialogue of friendship. Because really at the end of the day, that's my heart for people downtown, is that we would be able to regain relationship with people versus leaving them to their own devices to figure out how to navigate life. We need diversity in our church. And I think with economics and poverty, it's one of those things. But then we also he brings them to a person in the inn. And so there's a part of journeying. Yes, you sacrifice and you carry the person on your own journey if you feel inclined to do that. But then at some point you bring in someone who has resource. And so this inn person was able to provide a shelter for this person. This is kind of where Jeff comes in talking about Lot 42. There's different resources for shelter. There's different resources where we actually get to bring other people in who have a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more understanding about the circumstance or the situation. And we journey with them. And we even go as far as to provide extra generosity of saying, hey, I want to make sure that this person is cared for and taken care of beyond what I just did. And I think just paints a beautiful picture of who Jesus is, because it's not just a one-off. It's a journeying with people, and it's a commitment. And I don't know what the plans this person had, but he had to forgo those in order to care for people. And it's always one of those struggles for me with talking to people is like, how do we love homeless people? Because really, to me, it gets down to the root of let the Holy Spirit start you off somewhere in your relationship with neighbors. And Jesus says your neighbor is someone that you'd randomly come across on a path. And from that starting point, I think if God has a heart for poverty, if God has a heart for the poor, then he can instill that in you and give you the knowledge to continue more and more into that. I don't want to throw out ideas about how to go save the world. I think it starts with being a good neighbor. So I'm going to pray, and then I'll leave it to the rest of this awesome senior time. And I know you guys love Jesus because you guys are indoors on a beautiful day. And so that is such a testament today that you guys love Jesus. So let me pray for you guys and we'll get going. Yeah, Jesus, we just pray for your heart to be a good neighbor, to love our neighbors, to actually respond to the daily relations that we're supposed to have, God. We are so focused on ourselves. We are so set in routine, and God, it takes a big God to interrupt that. And so I just pray that you would interrupt our hearts to see the people as you see them, to be able to care for them as you would care for them, to love them as you would love them, and to really bring back the humanity of that, and not making things project, but yet making people's lives more dignified and respected. And so, I pray for the rest of this service, and that you would really be glorified as we learn more about Lot 42, and we learn about the awesome things that can happen when you try different things of housing and how to care for people. And so I just pray for Jeff and Gareth as they lead the rest of this time. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
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 Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much for that, Mike. I appreciate your words and just the insights and the practicality of how Scripture can be seen and addressed to the way we experience life. Well, we're in for a journey. We're on this journey. Mike has done a great job of sort of introducing to that from a biblical foundation. And now we have, as our guest speaker, we have Jeff Wilmer from Lot 42. Jeff is the former Chief Administrative Officer from the City of Kitchener, and as a result had a unique understanding of all the loopholes that need to be traveled through in order to be able to conceive of and make something new and different happen. And I'm not sure exactly where all you're going to be going with us today, but the time is yours. But I will say one more thing. Jeff is, I believe, a parishioner, member over at the West Heights Community Church, and apparently he plays a mean worship sax. So, God bless you as you share with us, and the time is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Pastor Gareth, and thank you all for being interested in this initiative. We have a video that is a pretty good introduction, and Pastor Gareth said it's queued up and ready to go. So why don't we do that in just a couple seconds? It has some good visuals here that help help show you what's going on and introduce you to some of the people better than I can talk about it. One of the people that you'll meet in the video is Ron Doyle. And Ron passed away about a week and a half ago. He was diagnosed with lung cancer last summer, and it was he was soldiered on bravely. He did very well. He was quite strong right till almost to the very end. It was only the last 8 days or so when he was first hospitalized and then sent home for palliative care. So we're really missing him now, but I think the rest of the team is pulling together more strongly to try to fill the void that his passing has left. So with that somber note, I'll pass it to Gareth to show the video.
In Kitchener-Waterloo, the issue of homelessness is a polarizing one.
I mean, this is Canada. Everybody's got an opportunity to get an education and a job. I'd say pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
The city's response is not great. You know, there's a lot of people that are on the streets. They can't even sleep in a park. They can't sleep anywhere without getting harassed by police. They're easily silenced, and they can't advocate on their own behalf most of the time.
I had a business downtown, Duke Corner Store. I kept seeing homeless people outside sleeping, and I'm like, what's going on in this town?
If you paid attention, you could feel the friction slowly turning to fire.
And I said, screw this, something has to be done. I actually turned my store into a homeless shelter as a protest.
With an upscale restaurant set to open up across the street, Nadine's convenience store, full of tents, rubbed a lot of influential people the wrong way. And if the issue of homelessness was a fire, Ron Doyle represented gasoline.
When I first met Ron Doyle, I wondered who he was because he just walked into the store like he owned it.
Here's a guy who's rough around the edges. He swears a lot. He's pushy.
He can be a little obstinate sometimes, even belligerent.
Meanwhile, the city shut my store down. Then COVID hits. So I attended an emergency meeting about the homeless crisis.
Ron interrupts the meeting and says, Nadine, what if starting tonight you come and live on my property and you bring anyone you want to?
And then the same night I went out and I got 15 homeless people and I picked them up, brought them here, and I went back for another trip.
Soon, Nadine's indoor tent city was reborn under Ron's roof.
There is a group of people that think that this is very wrong. And they think that if we give people a little bit of rope, they're going to hang themselves here.
But I think if you give people a chance and give them back their dignity, they can change.
Hi, this is Jeff. Please leave a message.
Jeff, it's Ron Doyle. Listen, I want you to come check out what we've got going on here.
I may not have been the most sympathetic city employee.
That's something I really regret doing.
I hear you, man. So you'd rather be homeless than be separated from your dogs?
Mm-hmm.
But actually taking the time to learn about these people's stories, my presumptions about them were simply not true.
I was working in my wood shop, and I hear a honking.
So I'm driving down the highway when I saw this homemade shed for sale. And I asked him, how much do you need to make a bunch of these?
But then he told me what he needed these structures for.
Eventually, I decided to join the project to help work around the bylaws threatening to shut it down. So this provincial order, this is our ticket to get around the zoning issue. Being here, I've seen how these tiny homes make a huge impact on the lives of these people.
Welcome to my house.
So I got a spot to put my artwork up. Not too big, but perfect.
No building permits, no problem.
No issues at all.
It's so nice to have a mirror. Shelves for all my stuff.
Just had power hooked up, so a lot brighter now.
Yeah, that looks way better than that.
Volunteering here, I noticed Ron, who got where he is by marching to his own beat, and the camp residents, who also crave control of their own lives. They are the most unlikely, yet most perfect allies. And they aren't marching alone.
I get involved with projects like this because these are our brothers and sisters at the end of the day.
A Better Tent City has given my life so much meaning and purpose.
So this is a team we're honored to be part of.
Ron can be impatient.
I can't stand people who talk your ear off but don't lift a finger when it's time to get going.
But if one of my parishioners finds a new way to help the less fortunate, then I'm going to get behind that.
I see the world very differently now. Everybody has a unique story, and I have the people here to thank for giving mine a better ending.
There are currently over 50 residents living at A Better Tent City, with more structures arriving to meet the increasing demand.
It's getting there, one piece at a time.
Through creating this thriving community, this most unexpected crew found strength in solidarity.
Don't forget, we are a Better Tent City and they're all illegal. Yeah. So are we. So let's go.
And learned they were stronger still when they worked together. Maybe it's time then we all ask ourselves, who can I lend my strength to?
All right, thank you very much. So, the video is effective in the sense that it introduces you to the people and gives you some visual images of the cabins and the indoor tenting and the kitchen and so on. I will say that the filmmaker did take a few liberties with the facts and with the sequencing of events. So it sort of gives you the theme, but it's not exactly perfectly accurate. But that's the nature of filmmaking, I guess, is that sometimes they rearrange the order to make it a better story. So the background of this really going back, a couple of decades, really, people who've been working with the homeless community in Waterloo region for 25 years or more will observe that, back in the 90s, there were maybe 30 to 50 homeless people in Kitchener-Waterloo. And many of them were homeless because of mental illness or alcoholism or both. Now it's hard to know the number exactly, but there's probably between 300 and 500, so 10 times more people that are homeless. And in most cases, there's a certain element of mental illness and drug addiction. So mental illness is a constant. Alcoholism is no longer such a factor, but drug addiction is very much a factor. And then there's also economic reasons why people have simply been displaced from an affordable room in a lodging house. And so Ron Doyle became aware, over the last 2 or 3 years about a great number of unsheltered people in downtown Kitchener. And he was wondering, why is it that there's so many people who are on the streets that are unsheltered? And so when he and I started talking about this and we started to realize there are people who either cannot or will not use the shelter system. And a lot of times it has to do with mental illness, but sometimes it's because there are couples on the street. And if they had to go to the men's shelter or the women's shelter, they'd be separated from each other. There was no shelter for couples. People whose pet is really their only close loved one, their only close companion. None of the shelters allowed you to have a pet. So there are people who kind of choose, I use the word cautiously, they don't really choose to be homeless, but they don't have a lot of choices and they end up being homeless for a number of reasons. And a lot of times mental illness plays a big part of that. And so Ron had the idea, what if we were to create a place where we could give people a basic home, just a one-room cabin, something small enough, under 100 square feet, wouldn't need a building permit. And the Working Center had experimented with this a few years ago at St. John's Kitchen on Victoria Street downtown with shipping containers sort of cut in half so that there were 2 different bunkies, 8 foot by 10 foot. And so that's kind of what we had in mind. But we shifted to the wooden cabins when Ron met Elam up in the Harriston area, and that really was a launching point for us to get moving with this. We had met Nadine Green. We had seen what she was doing with a pop-up shelter in her convenience store downtown, and she had 15 or 20 people essentially sleeping on the floor, spending nights there. But they had a warm, dry place to be. And they were very respectful of each other. It was always clean and quiet in there. I was quite surprised and impressed by how orderly and organized it was. I thought it might be a whole lot more chaotic, but it's a bit of a theme there. I was wrong about that too. So we actually engaged planning students from the University of Waterloo who were working on a course to learn how to become consultants. And there were two teams of young planners, senior year students who became our consultants, and we became their client. And the project was to design a better tent city, something that had cabins where people could live in and maybe had some common facilities like a kitchen and washrooms and so on. And we had a couple of different properties that they could use, which were kind of theoretical, but kind of real as well. This was a real problem. We really did intend to address it. And we really had zeroed in on small cabins as part of our solution. Ron's property on Ardelt Place in Kitchener in an industrial area was one of the properties, but it wasn't the preferred one. We really thought it would be better to be close to the downtown, close to Ray of Hope where people can get an evening meal, close to St. John's Kitchen where they can get a noontime meal, close to where the services are that homeless people rely on. But it ended up being that we couldn't secure the availability of a property near the downtown. And Ron had the property at Ardelt, which was not being used in COVID times as an event space. So he said, these people need help. Nobody else is helping them. I'm going to offer the property up. So that was really the launching point for us in April of last year. And it would not work without Nadine Green giving the ownership, the leadership to it. She has this wonderful ability to calm people down and bring them on board with a hug and a smile and showing love to them. Where a lot of the people, and we now have 50 or more people living at a Better Tent City, they resist authority figures and they resist anybody who's trying to direct and control. And Nadine is able to influence them by not being an authority figure. She's more of a loving sister or a mother. And she's generous and loving, and that people there really respond well to her. So she's been part of this from the beginning. She was a volunteer for many, many months at the start of the project. We've now found a way to compensate her, as well as Alvin, who assists her as site coordinators with some grant funding that we were able to receive. So the initiative started off with people tenting indoors. And the biggest aspect of that is that for homeless people living rough, they're always trespassing, right? They're either in a park or in a woodlot or in a laneway, but they know they're trespassing. They know that at any time, the police or somebody's going to tell them to move along. You can't be here. I don't care where you go. You just have to go somewhere else that's not here. So Ron was able to give them a place where they're no longer trespassing. And that's a big help to them. They knew they would be there night after night. They didn't have to worry about where am I going to sleep. Toilets were available. The kitchenette was available. And Nadine was there to give them comfort and leadership. We quickly raised enough money to get about a dozen cabins. And we did this without any kind of a sophisticated fundraising campaign. It was really just word of mouth that people liked the idea and it was cost effective to get going. So pretty soon we had a dozen cabins. We outfitted a used house trailer for a shower and laundry facility. And we did some basic kitchen improvements. And so the community was off and running, and volunteers really, really embraced the project. Not only by donating money towards it, but volunteers with a food program. I mean, the food bank of Waterloo Region has been a big, big help to us. They make deliveries to the site at least once a week. But there's a group of people called the Kitchener Waterloo Kitchen Co-op, and they make a hot evening meal for 40 or 50 people 6 or 7 nights of the week, and have done for months on end. So that's been amazing, partly because people are fed on the site, but also because the volunteers come out a lot of times to make the meal at the property and to take time and spend the time with the residents. And the residents are, at first anyway, and I think still, astounded by this, because they go through their lives with everybody kind of ignoring them, society turning its back on them, people avoiding eye contact, avoiding making conversation with them. And here were people who took time to come and spend time with them and cook for them and talk with them. And this was something that most of the residents just didn't expect to happen in their lives. So it was a big component of helping them have hope for the future, and a big component of helping them become more stable in their day-to-day lives. St. Mary's Church jumped on board partway through the project. They and their parishioners came up with funding for 12 more cabins. They engaged high school students to insulate them and install flooring and wall boards, and to paint the exteriors of not only those 12 cabins, but the ones we already had. So that was a big help. And St. Mary's has continued to be a big supporter of the project and to give leadership to all the behind the scenes work. And so it was interesting because we started to hear from homeless people and those who work with them, outreach workers from beyond Kitchener. So folks elsewhere in this region or beyond the region, they had heard about a Better Tent City and they wanted to come there. And we had limited capacity, and we completely left it up to Nadine to be the gatekeeper. She not only works at a Better Tent City, but she has a night mission as well. She drives around KW. She knows where to find homeless people, and she will go there late at night with food to drop off, or blankets, or a tent, or just a hug and a smile. And she'll just connect with people and find out how they're doing, what they need, and is there some way she can help. So sometimes she's able to give them a ride to a shelter. Sometimes she will invite them to come and be part of the family at a Better Tent City. So when and the way Nadine puts it is that the guys here, she always calls them the guys, although I think it's at least 50% females living there. That they get to live on their own terms. That's why they prefer this to being in a shelter, because the shelters do good work. I mean, that the Ray of Hope and the Y and the House of Friendship, they are performing an essential service by providing shelter with supports, but that doesn't work for everybody. And the people who remained unsheltered were the ones that Ron really felt he needed to help, and Nadine as well. And so my worry was that people want to come to a Better Tent City because they're trying to avoid getting help. They don't want to overcome their addiction. They don't want a counselor. And were we enabling people to continue a lifestyle of drug use? So I would usually ask the question, what is it about a Better Tent City that makes you want to come here? And what I kept on hearing from outreach workers and from homeless people was that it was nothing to do with drugs. It was the fact that they had privacy, they would have a place of their own, and that there was food. And that combination was just something that was very, very desirable to the individuals that want to live at a Better Tent City. Even so much now that, excuse me, when some of them have had the opportunity to move into a place of their own, an actual apartment, they've declined it, because the isolation of living in an apartment, they fear would either kill them or result in them reverting to the behaviors that would get them thrown out of the apartment. And then they would be homeless and wandering, living rough again. Whereas at a Better Tent City, they have certainty of where they're going to be day after day. They have the support of each other as a family, and Nadine and Alvin as leaders. So we originally thought of this as a temporary solution to help people transition from living rough to being sort of housing ready. And I realize that's a term that not everybody likes, but I think we've also realized that there may be people who who never want to live in a bachelor apartment, who are not going to be ready for a communal living of some kind of congregate setting, we might actually have stumbled across a permanent solution, that this is basic affordable housing. Sorry, a call came in there just now. This is basic affordable housing that gives a combination of privacy and independence, but also the support of a community that acts like family. And for many of these people, their own families have sort of given up on them or turned their back on them, and society has turned its back on them. So for them to have 50 brothers and sisters essentially who live together and support each other, and for sure there are disputes, right? There's fights, there's arguments, there's it's a rough a system of rough justice. There's violence and theft, and it's not genteel living by any means, but it's a whole lot better on balance than living rough, and as evidenced by the choices that people are making, better than being isolated in a place of your own. So, it's almost a year now since this started. It was the middle of April last year when people started tenting indoors, and we are pleasantly surprised at how effective it has been. It was inexpensive to set up, inexpensive to operate, and fairly effective at actually helping people who seemed to be the ones who were the most difficult to help. The whole region's shelter system evolved during COVID, that the House of Friendship moved to the Radisson Hotel and provided shelter care right there on the premises. That then evolved to the Inn at Waterloo. The Working Center has the student dorm at University Avenue. So there's 100 people were living at Inn of Waterloo, and 80 people at the dorm, and I think 40 or 50 at St. Mark's Church in a facility run by the Y. And then we've got 50 people at a Better Tent City. So we understand that it's not a one size fits all, and that some people seem to gravitate to the more sort of the outdoor living style that we have offered at a Better Tent City. One of the biggest improvements we've made in recent months is a methadone clinic. Methadone is a drug that, and I should know, but I've forgotten now. When people, I think it might be a crack cocaine addiction, that methadone enables you to wean yourself off of reliance on cocaine, and it's pharmaceutical grade and it's covered as a prescription, but you have to take it daily. And so the system is that you would go to the methadone clinic and get your little shot glass of orange juice with the methadone in it. The pharmacist or clinician needs to see you consume it, so nobody's going to take it away and sell it. So we now have a methadone clinic operating at the site, and about a dozen of our residents are now on methadone and have been for at least a month or two now. The pharmacist comes to the site daily and dispenses and observes the people taking their medicine, and there's a noticeable difference in the atmosphere. That it's a lot more calm, a lot less disruptive, and somewhat less violent, because people are no longer either trying to steal something to get money to buy drugs, or because the quality of the medicine they're taking is consistent and predictable, whereas the quality of the drugs they were taking was inconsistent and unpredictable and would cause them to spin out into psychosis or to get violent or to overdose and need to be resuscitated. So not only for the 12 people participating in the program, but for the whole community of 50, there's a more calm environment now. So this has been quite spectacular, the improvement that's been made within the atmosphere of the community just within the last couple of months. And one of the school boards, Waterloo Region Public School Board, donated or loaned to us a shipping container built as essentially a portable office. So we're able to use that as a secure clinic for the clinicians and nurse practitioners and the pharmacists to use. And so that's been a big help as well. And another example of how individuals and agencies and businesses have embraced the project and tried to find different ways to support it. So that kind of brings us up to date. The property is being sold, the Ardelt property, lot 42. Ron, as he was realizing he was in the last stages of life, was trying to clean up his affairs and sell his properties. So it is in the process of being sold. We will have to move within the next few months, and we're heavily engaged now in a search for property, and that's proving to be quite challenging. There is no ideal site for something as unique as a Better Tent City, and we've had lots of conversations with the city and the region, as well as with others in the community that are supportive. And so, I think it's a matter of prayer for many of us involved, and I would certainly invite you to support us in that way, to find what is God's will for this project. We feel that it's successful for all kinds of reasons, that the Lord seems to be behind the success of this. But as sometimes when doors are opening now in terms of prospective properties, we find that they then quickly close. And so, part of it is to seek God's will for the people and for the project. Time is certainly of the essence. We need to make decisions within the next few weeks or a couple months at the latest as to where to move to next. And so it's, a permanent site would be great, but I think we're being realistic, and even a site we could use for a year or two would suit our purposes. We're a fairly portable community. So that's kind of the quick and dirty story of a Better Tent City. I would also say that Ron and I, and in the early stages of this, our goal was to do it and to show that it can work. And we believe that we have achieved that. Our second goal was to encourage the replication of this model, either elsewhere within this region or in other communities across Canada. And there's quite a few communities, sometimes the municipality themselves, municipal government, sometimes individuals or service clubs that are interested in doing this. And so they're looking at our model and adapting it for their own communities and their own support networks. But the folks in Woodstock, in Chatham, and Windsor, Ontario, seem to be reasonably close to starting something similar, because they have almost exactly the same challenges with homeless and unsheltered people in those communities as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to Gareth.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jeff. There are certain points throughout your presentation where I just find myself tugging between the different emotions of rejoicing and weeping, partly for joy, but also for the condition that we have allowed things to get within our own community. And so glad that there is all of these different ministries that are and services that are looking towards providing the help that there is. But as you said, one size doesn't fit all, and there are certain things that for some people, what a Better Tent City does for them, it provides some community, but also the flexibility to be who they are without sort of having to fall underneath someone else's structure or whatever else you might say. We have several people here. I'm sure there are questions that you have asking. If you're watching on Facebook and you have a question, just put it into the chat line there, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So, but to start us off, anybody in our team online here?
Well, Jeff, thanks so much for sharing. So good to hear what's happening with the Better Tent City. The importance of community as well that is developed there. It's great to hear about. When it comes to looking for a new space, what are some of the attributes of a space that would make it ideal for the relocation? What kind of services are necessary, that kind of thing? I don't know if you could speak to that, and that might help people who might have an idea or someone that they would like to contact about this.
Yeah, thank you. That's so I think the ideal site for us has no sensitive neighbors. So we don't really belong in a residential area or near a residential area. The 50 people that live there are, fairly disruptive to each other and the community around them. So we don't want to necessarily bring that into a stable residential setting. So an industrial area actually seems to work well for us. Now, the fact that we're a residential use in an industrial area is a zoning problem, but I managed to work with the city of Kitchener to find a way around that. So we're kind of looking at industrial properties. Ideally, if it's got a building on already with toilets, that would be a huge benefit. We wouldn't have to build something. And if it's got some space that we could set up the cabins outdoors or having people tenting indoors, both of those seem to be working pretty well for us. So yeah, no residential neighbors. Having water and sewer is a big help, in electricity. So we are kind of looking at rural properties as well, because there are no neighbors really. I mean, there's farms around, but not a lot of neighbors. But there's a disadvantage really that it's pretty isolating for the residents themselves, and certainly for all the volunteers that come out to the site daily. So there are pros and cons to that. I think we've realized that this does not need to be downtown, and the residents themselves are actually not wanting to go back downtown for many reasons. That they realize that there were aspects of the urban lifestyle that were drawing them back into the cycle of addiction and reliance on drugs, and that they're kind of happy to be removed from that. They could really stay at the property all the time if they wanted to. So yeah, we're looking generally for something in an industrial or mixed use area, ideally with a building, but not necessarily. We could bring in containers and portables for kitchen facilities, washroom and shower facilities, and we're prepared to do that.
I guess that leads to another question that has to do with transportation. How do they find the place? And then how do they travel to that? I mean, I'm assuming they're not staying there every day, all the time, that there is some sort of journeying back and forth. So is it important to be close to transportation routes, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So it's a whole mix. I think a lot of people walk to and from the site. A lot of people ride their bikes to and from the site. Some use transit, and some will take a taxi from time to time, or have a friend drop them off or pick them up. Nadine has a car, and she'll drive people around and pick them up, but she's really busy, so that doesn't happen as much as it used to. So it helps if it's within walking and biking distance of the city services that people need, because they're real people with real lives, right? They've got friends, and they sometimes need to go to the bank or to the doctor or their parole officer or whoever it is. So it helps that most of those things are within walking or biking distance of where we are. And it would certainly be a disadvantage if we had to go to a rural property. In terms of how people found the place in the first place, it's almost in every case, Nadine found them and brought them. They arrived in the passenger seat of Nadine's car with their belongings thrown in the back.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. I was noticing in the video that it's a certain demographic that was portrayed in the video, most of them being people who've been in the system for 10 years or so and know the atmosphere of kind of the self-police, the good old the days of out of the cold back in the day, when, like you were saying before, drugs became more of the majority. There was an alcoholism type of culture, but there was also a spirit of self-police and respect, right? And so within your video, it kind of shows this demographic that understands that. And so I guess my question is, are you finding that you're seeing more youth or like the young adult aged homeless people entering into the community, or does it tend to be your people who have been homeless for a while or in that demographic?
Yeah, it seems to be more people who have been homeless for a while and really haven't found a place where they fit in. We are also quite conscious of the services that other organizations provide. So One Roof is the shelter for youth in Waterloo Region. And One Roof was quite concerned that young people, like anyone under 30, is the population they serve. They didn't want young people who are not yet deep into the drug addiction to be living at a better tent city where almost everybody is suffering through a lifestyle of drug addiction or trying to overcome it. And so we make, I think everybody at a better tent city is 30 or over, and Nadine sort of tries to encourage younger homeless people to connect with One Roof. So there are older people there. It's sort of, there's probably a fair number of people in their 30s, but it goes right up to folks in their 50s and 60s as well. So it's a fairly broad spread of ages. As I mentioned earlier, it's about a half and half men and women, and some pets as well. And the significance of that is at least a couple of things. One is that the companionship that a pet gives to a homeless person is really profound. When there's nobody else in their life, they're usually a dog. Their dog shows them unconditional love. So you really can't underestimate how important that is for people generally, but for a person who's completely on their own. But the other aspect of it is condensation. So one thing we learned that we should do differently for next winter is we insulated these cabins, but we didn't insulate under the floors. And what was happening was condensation was forming on the floors, and they were getting wet and mold was starting to form. And it was happening not in every cabin, but the ones where there was a couple living together or a person with a dog, particularly a large dog with a lot of exhaling going on. So more condensation, and so that was another aspect of that. So this summer we will engage in a project to retrofit the cabins, get them up on a forklift, insulate underneath, and the new ones, any new ones that we secure, we'll make sure we insulate underneath as well. So lessons learned is just one of many examples how we're learning as we go along.
Sherry.
Adam and I have been talking about whether I can do this, but she's on my lap and she should behave. Okay. All right. I was wondering, Jeff, what about intruders? Do you ever have anything like that where people sort of want to sort of invade the camp or sort of barge their way in? And are they allowed to invite guests in ever?
Yes. So the residents are certainly allowed to invite guests in, and they do. Some unwanted guests find their way in too. And it's not so much, a violent intrusion so much as it's a subtle visit of a guest who comes and eventually proves themselves to be unwanted. People come and go, not a lot actually. So I shouldn't say that people come and go a lot, but there's many of the people who live there have been there for the entire 11-month journey. And when it grew from 20 people to 30, from 30 to 50, most people, once they're there, they stay. I don't want to make this just a numbers thing, but there have been 2 people that we had to ask to leave. And again, Nadine, in her unique way, was able to say, you know what, it's not working. I'm going to give you a ride to somewhere. So she would pick them up and their stuff and not just kick them out, but take them to something. So good for her. We have had one fatality, one drug overdose. And frankly, I feared there would be a lot more than that, given the nature of the population. So that's actually, while tragic, not as bad as it might have been. And there's been a few people who have chosen to leave because it's just not for them. And we get that. But yeah, there are intruders from time to time. And sometimes they are guests who are invited by some people, but not welcomed by most people. But sometimes it's just, someone who's stolen a car, committed a crime, and this is a good place to ditch the car because it's kind of hidden from view, and the police will suspect the Better Tent City residents rather than the guy who stole the car. So that happens as well. So yeah, it's been an eye-opener for many of us who realized what a sheltered life we have lived. to see that, the folks who are living rough just have to deal with some of this stuff. And there is our good friends at the Working Center, and the Working Center has been a great supporter and advisor for us as well. They call it sort of the rough justice, or the rough system of street justice, that, rightly or wrongly, these people solve their own problems their own way. And a lot of times that's with fists or whatever weapon is they can pick up with their own hands. And the interesting thing is that they all get it. They understand that's kind of the way it is. And sometimes that causes them to say, well, if I got beat up last time, I won't do that again, but not often. Logic doesn't always prevail when people are living with addiction and mental illness. So that's been an interesting lesson for the rest of us as well, that, we thought, well, we need rules here. We got to have, zero tolerance for violence and consequences for theft and stuff like that. But logic simply does not prevail. Addiction is a powerful force that, ruins people's lives. And if they're out of cash and they see something that's of value, they are going to steal it. There's no question about it. Even if they know getting caught will get them beat up, they can't help themselves. So that's been, an eye-opener for us, and a reality that it really underscores the benefit of the methadone program, and has kind of got us starting to pay attention to the issue of safe supply of drugs. That some, I know Portugal seems to be ahead of other countries with this, that rather than have people commit crimes so they can have money to buy illegal drugs, what if they were able to get prescription drugs, and there'd be much less crime around drugs? And eventually you would hope that people could be, their reliance could be reduced, and maybe even overcome their addiction. But even if not, the community benefit of no drug-related violence would be a huge step forward. So that's kind of an area of interest as well. But I think there's a lot to understand about it, because you certainly don't want to enable and encourage people to embrace a lifestyle of drug use. It's if anything, this experience has impressed upon many of us the terrible ruining effect that drugs have on lives, and not just the individual, but their families who are now alienated from them, their children. Like many of the people who live at a Better Tent City have children, either in foster care or living with relatives. They're completely, in most cases, they're disconnected from them. So yeah, we certainly don't want to be enabling and encouraging drug use, but when people are already living with an addiction, there's reason to pay attention to ways to manage that and help people maybe overcome.
Any questions online, Adam?
Yeah, so Marvin's asking, and I know he's not alone in this. What ways are there we can help, and are you looking for any more volunteers? What would that look like for people that are, as we heard earlier, that done talking and ready to start doing something?
Yeah, well, those words are music to our ears. So thank you for that. What we have great reliance on volunteers, but actually have enough volunteers for making meals. But that can change from time to time. So I'll keep you posted on that. I think it's getting ready for the move, and implementing the move is going to be where we need volunteers, because there's quite a lot involved in picking up, 26 cabins and a trailer and an office, and moving them to a new property and starting to prepare that property. So sort of construction trades are going to be needed, and project management and logistics coordinators and that type of thing. I think another element of it, though, is that the volunteers who have really made a profound impact on the residents are the ones who take the time to be at the site to do something, whether that's to wash dishes or to make a meal or to help in some way, do minor maintenance work and that type of thing. Because it's while they're helping with hands-on work that they're able to connect with the residents and have conversations with them. There's a big difference between that and somebody who shows up to say, I'm here be a volunteer counselor, but then nobody wants to talk to them, and what are they going to do, right? So the residents themselves will seem to naturally migrate to somebody who's there to help in a tangible way, and the counseling comes as a byproduct of that. So yeah, there are opportunities for that. We probably always need people to either wash dishes, and we have a dishwasher, but it's really to sterilize dishes that have been washed. It's like an industrial scale thing. But the biggest problem we have is that people will take a dish with their food back to their cabin, and then we don't see the dish again. We completely run out of cutlery and dishes, and Nadine and Alvin will go door to door saying, can I collect dirty dishes? And everybody denies having any. But Alvin has figured out a system of the new currency is a couple of cigarettes. If he gives people a couple of cigarettes, he can trade those for dishes. And then suddenly we've got hundreds of dishes that we can wash and sterilize. We're back in business. So yeah, the volunteers are certainly going to be needed to gear up for the move. But also even before that, if people are willing to come out to the site to help out with, either just cleanup or washing dishes and make connections with the residents, that's always welcome also.
And who should they connect with, or like, what's the first step? I'm assuming it isn't just show up, but maybe right. It is. So you can tell us. It's
probably better to connect with either Nadine Green or Laura Hamilton. I haven't mentioned Laura yet, but Laura has been a tower of strength in this project. She is part of the kitchen co-op, and she's the one who coordinates and schedules the volunteers who make the hot evening meal. And she is out at the site almost every day of the week. And then on weekends, she comes and makes brunch. Her organization and other related initiatives were part of the Unsheltered campaign, the Food Not Bombs campaign. They've been doing a lot for decades to support those living rough in our community. So Laura also has good insights as to where people are needed. And I think if you come in with her, you'll be welcomed immediately. If you come in on your own, you'll be treated with suspicion. So yeah, but you've got my contact, and I can connect you with Nadine and or Laura.
Sherry, you have to unmute.
There we go. It sounds a lot like camp. We used to have to go looking for a camp after snack time, for dishes after snack time. I was wondering if an old campground would work, or even if any of the conservation areas would let you do something over the winter and then maybe find another alternative for summer. But those were just running through my mind. I'm sure you've already done that.
It's interesting because we have thought of that. We even thought of, well, what about golf courses? There was nobody using a golf course clubhouse in the winter months, right? And I'm looking at all these community resources that are built and paid for, and nobody uses them for half the time. Even right that most of the week they're empty. And I know it's more common in the U.S. than here. There are networks of churches that support people living in their vehicle. It's obviously not that uncommon in Canada because it's cold sleeping in a car in Canadian winters, but more in the southern states, pretty common that people live in their car. And churches say, you can park in our parking lot overnight. You won't be hassled by the police. You can use our washrooms, and we'll connect with you and bring you a meal and that type of thing. So yeah, we started looking at conservation areas in the winter, other campgrounds, but the stability of being in one place for at least a year at a time is a big deal.
Yeah. Can I ask something else? Do you have any expectation of the residents? Like if volunteers are coming to help with cleanup or doing things like that, is there any expectation placed on the residents, and any expectation that they'll sort of, if they do get off drugs, that they're expected to kind of move on? Or are they just welcome to be there as long as it suits them?
Yeah, so that second one is a fascinating question. So I'll deal with the first one quickly. Yes, there are expectations on the residents. We actually sat down with a group of them to work out. We didn't want to call them rules and regulations, but I think we called them commitments that Nadine said, if, we're committed to you to allow you to live here, then we need you to commit to each other. And so we had like sort of 20 different guidelines as to treat each other with respect and help out where needed and that type of stuff. And so, yeah, people do wash dishes. They do sweep floors. They do clean up garbage. They do clean the toilets and unclog the toilets with alarming regularity. Actually, the stuff that gets put down the toilets is mind-boggling. Needles and clothing, and we spend a lot on professional unclogging services. So yeah, the residents are expected to help out. When something is sort of going beyond the call, Nadine is able to give out $10 and $20 bills for somebody. She says, if you can do this for me, there's $20 in it for you. And we got some grant money to actually allow a sort of a fee for service system of going beyond the call. So when people are stabilized in their drug addiction and maybe ready to move on, this is a kind of a learning process for us now, because we're just getting to that stage. We had thought that the best solution would be a separate community where they can stay with each other, but be removed from the people who are still living a lifestyle of drug addiction. That made all kinds of sense to me. Again, I was totally wrong, because the 15 people that are on methadone are still connected to the other 35 people. They are supportive and family and community. And the other element of this, which Laura pointed out, is we could get another 10 or 15 people on methadone, but if they think going on methadone means I have to leave this community, then they won't do it. So you know what? There are all these subtleties that we really hadn't thought of before. So it's another aspect of learning as you go, but there's been a small number of people that are stable enough to re-enter the workforce and get employment. Small number of people that have been matched up with housing and have moved into a place of their own, but a much larger number of people who may never become employable and may never want to live in a place of their own, but they are much more stable and better off now. And, I'm hopeful that we can do more than that to help them. But somebody had observed that, maybe for some people, this is a hospice, that their addiction will kill them, but we're making their life more comfortable for a time. I hesitate to sort of accept that as a reality, but I think there is some wisdom to that for some people. Now, whether that's 40 people or 3 people, I kind of hope it's for 3, that there's majority of people that we can give them more tangible help for turning their lives around. Go ahead.
You'll have to unmute.
Okay. Yep. You mentioned that people can be offered a place of their own, but they'll decline because they're afraid of the isolation. If things change, and especially with the methadone and that, do they get another chance? I don't imagine those places come up easily. So have they blown it completely, or are they still get another opportunity?
Yeah, I think the reality is, if you go to the front of the line and say no thanks, you go to the back of the line, and that's a long line. So there's a lot of complexity towards matching people up with the right type of supportive housing, I think. So it may be that somebody could get a second chance almost right away, but I think it's much more likely that you had your chance, and so you said no, we've moved on. There's lots of other people that need this.
Yeah, I'll just speak about the rotation of that too, right? From the shelter standpoint, like they get people who are a problem to others get kind of the rotation, get the ring around. They go to Cambridge to Bridges and they get kicked out. So then they go to the House of Friendship, and then they go to St. Mark's Church. And I think what Jeff was touching on about the rules thing is what makes Lot 42 such a beautiful thing, because it reduces the rules as much as possible. And so those people who've been kicked out, I'm sure that they had a legitimate reason to kick out, knowing the background of it. My question is just, I went for a tour last week, and I was trying to find Mary, Alex, or Dragon to give me a bit more of a tour of Lot 42, some of the residents there. But I noticed, well, it didn't take much to notice. They're my friends. They love to scrap. They love to find stuff. And so, yeah, you mentioned it with dishes. They like to take dishes. Back when I worked at Ray of Hope, and then there's St. John's, you would find like a trail of dishes. You knew what St. John's dishes were downtown, and you knew what Ray of Hope dishes were, and somehow you'd find them places. But my main question has to do with, the buildup of metal, the buildup of different resources that they have accumulated. So one could call it hoarding, but to them, it's their treasure. But it's also a resource. Like, is there partnerships that you guys have explored with different ways to help them in their gleaning of scrap metal or their bikes or their other valuables, technology stuff? But usually that stuff, I don't know where the value in that is, but because they find the oldest technology stuff and call it treasure sometimes. So
yeah. So yeah, as you say, it's very visible, right? There's a lot of junk that's accumulated, and Ron Doyle from the beginning wanted his property to be better than that. We had seen examples of the Safe Spot community in Eugene, Oregon was a bit of a model for us early on. They built Conestoga huts, which were a really cool pop-up shelter that a person could build that's like 6 by 12 feet or something like that. It's a solid tent, essentially. But the visual images of the Safe Spot community after a while was that, there were tents and tarps and junk all over the place. And we thought, wow, that doesn't look like a better tent city. That looks like a tent city. And so with Ron and this being his property, he was a presence there almost every day to say, hey, this is my property and I've invited you here. I don't want to see your junk, right? So if you can't get it in your cabin, put it in the dumpster. And it was an ongoing frustration to him that he knew junk was accumulating day by day, and he would show up and people would suddenly get busy trying to clean up. And the fact that he had to pay to empty this enormous dumpster twice a month, it was actually costing him money to get rid of the donations because the community was very generous with clothing and bedding and that type of thing. But yeah, you've hit on a key thing that that people who used to be limited to what they could put in their backpack or in their grocery cart or the handlebars of their bikes now have 80 square feet, or with the volume of that packed right up to the rafters to accumulate stuff. And so most of the cabins are completely jammed with stuff because they can, right? And then it also accumulates outside. So part of Alvin's responsibility is to help minimize that and keep it clean, but it's been an ongoing aspect of frustration. Your question was more along the, can we use this for good, right? Because is there a way we can help? And we've explored a few different ideas of social enterprise. Can we find meaningful work for people there that actually appeals to, their skill set? Because these are very resourceful people, very resilient, very creative, and they've got strength in a lot of ways that it's very admirable. So we kind of struggled with that because we realized once people were stabilized, we should have been ready to give them something to do. And we failed at that. And so we're still looking for those opportunities. So yeah, you may be onto something with, gleaning for good. Because right now I think, if people find copper wire or catalytic converters, that's cash in their hand. But they are good at picking stuff up and collecting it. That's for sure.
Well, we've come sort of to the end of our time together, but I know one of the questions that our seniors tend to always ask is is there a way that we've talked a little bit about volunteering, but beyond volunteering, is there a way that we can just help out, whether it's through physical donations or through money donations? And if so, where does that get sent?
Good question. So physical donations, no thank you. I can hear the voice of the late Ron Doyle saying, we don't want any more well-intentioned people bring stuff. He would intercept vehicles at the gate to say, what are you doing here? So, yeah, Ron's legacy is multifaceted for sure. We certainly appreciate your prayer support for the Lord's direction on where we go next, if we go next. And donations of time, as I said, are welcome, for people that are wanting to help, just come and help clean up or wash dishes and those kind of things and make connections with the residents. Monetary donations, there's two ways to do that, and they're both would enable a tax receipt. The first is through St. Mary's Church. They have a fund and an account now for a Better Tent City. And the second is through the Social Development Center. And maybe, Gareth, I can provide you links for both of those so that we can get the details into people's hands. Social Development Center has been a big help to us. It's an agency that provides administrative support for small not-for-profits or projects like ours, because we aren't an organization. We're just a project. And so they were able to receive donations and issue receipts, and we didn't have to form an organization. So that was a big help. So yeah, I can send the links if people would like to make financial donations. We would certainly appreciate it. We actually are about to start a sort of a fundraising campaign as well. There's an organization called Tip Tap that it's like when you get to the grocery store and they say, would you like to round it up or, chip in $2 for this or that? But this is like a debit machine that'll be in public places, shopping malls and farmers markets and things like that. So if people want to donate a couple of dollars or 5 or 10 with their debit card, it would go to a Better Tent City. So that's coming. The challenge, of course, is that people will say, well, if you don't know where you're going to be, what are you going to do with this money? So we would rather, have a site in mind before we get real serious about it. But we are confident that we will find one. And once that's known, that I think then we can really kick it into high gear. But yeah, for now we're continuing to actually buy more cabins, and we've got operating expenses, utility bills, and things to pay as well. And we'd like to improve the compensation for Nadine and Alvin. The grant money is about to run out, so they're worth a lot more than we're able to pay them.
There was one question that did come in, and have you had any fires?
Surprisingly few. We've got about 20 fire extinguishers. They're made out of metal, so people come home with them. I don't know where they came from, but yeah, there was one fire, and it was started as a result of a fight. So we thought that the fires would be careless smoking or people cooking drugs or something like that. Apparently not. Currently, we've got a lot of careful smokers and careful drug cookers, but the fight resulted in somebody trying to burn down somebody else's cabin. And so this was quite disruptive, but it was put out with fire extinguishers, and true to form, the suspicious nature of the residents, like they resist authority. They don't want to call the police or the fire department if they can help it. So they would rather, solve their own disputes and put out their own fires. Thank you very much. They don't want anyone in uniform at the place. So yeah, surprisingly few, but yes, we have had one that I know of. There might have been others. There's probably a lot goes on that they don't tell me, right? And there's probably a lot that Ron knew about that he wasn't telling me either. It was an interesting kind of a tag team of complementary strengths and interests.
Oh. Well, this has been absolutely phenomenal. Jeff, when you send the information on the links for donations and stuff, I will put it up on our YouTube channel together with the video, as well as make a note underneath this video on our Facebook page, so you can avail yourself to that a little bit later on. Well, that brings us to the end here. I'm going to call on Sherry just to talk for a moment or two about what's coming up next month. The 22nd of April, our Food for Thought theme is a history of the Ontario Farmerettes from World War II. Bonnie Sitter is going to be our guest speaker. And Sherry, you want to just say a word or two about that?
Yes. I got to know Bonnie because she connected with my mom, who was an Ontario farmerette, and they were helpers on farms during the Second World War. So I think it'll be interesting because a lot of our Mennonite brethren background, my husband's family, was all coming out of Europe or having come out before things got terrible. And my mom was here in a typical small town up near Lake Huron. And they were invited, if they did okay in high school, to go and help on the farm. So Bonnie, I think you'll find it interesting. And they helped a lot on farms down near Vineland and Beansville and things like that. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. It's made up. She's written a book, co-authored it with Shirley English, and she was passionate to get it done while some of them were still surviving, because a lot of them, my mom just passed away in December and she was 91 and a half. And so she wanted them to see that they were valued and they did contribute. So I hope you enjoy it.
Perfect. Again, Jeff, thank you so much for just being here, sharing your heart, and we look forward to praying together with you and the organizers to find this exact right location for the next site for a Better Tent City, and we look forward to hearing more about that. Adam, would you like to close us off with prayer?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we've had together this morning, and for the encouragement of hearing about this Better Tent City, the incredible work that they are doing, Lord, the community that has been forming there and been such a blessing to those that are in need of shelter, in need of community, in need of a place where they can be themselves, where they can be cared for, and Lord, where they can experience goodness. Lord, we ask you to open our eyes to our neighbors, to those amongst us that we see and we may pass by, Lord. And Holy Spirit, would you stir us, not just to be people of talk, but people of action through faithful obedience. Would you give us just the faith and trust in you to respond quickly to the promptings of your Holy Spirit, and how you're calling us to become involved, to care for others, to see beyond our own agenda, as we heard in the story of the Samaritan this morning that Mike shared. Would you call us and lead us into that action, God? We pray for Lot 42 and the Better Tent City, Lord, for your provision of a new location, one that will serve that community well. And Lord, would you just open the right doors, and would you stir the hearts of those that own land and could be the potential new home, Lord. And may you continue, Lord, to guide us in our city and around Canada and even the world in how we can care for, how we can be for and with those that are hurting and on the margins. And thank you for this, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. God bless you, everybody.
Thank you all.